Nice to have you on the show, Penny.
Thank you.
So, I know enough about you through the band Crass,
Yeah.
but let's start. I usually ask about the books, but with you, if you can just tell the audience a little bit about you and your past and what makes you who you are and why you write what you do.
Well, I could put it all down to one single event in my life, which occurred when I was about 5 years old, which would have been um, when the Second World War ended, about that time, uh, slightly after. And there was a book I pulled out a book from my parents' library, which was pretty extensive. They're both great readers. Um, and started flicking through it. It was just had a black cover with a star on the front, um, which I didn't recognise. It was actually, the Star of David, and the book actually was about the concentration camps with photos, and obviously, a very young kid. I really don't know what age I was. I was maybe 5, 6, something like that. Um, and I was just looking at all these dead bodies lying in a pit. Um, my dad, who I didn't meet until I was about 2 or 3, had been at war and he never spoke about it, and understandably. And I didn't know about it, understandably, but this was it. That was war. That's what dad had been doing. Um, I didn't know the difference and I didn't dare ask it. It wasn't long before I started getting a different picture. Um, But Dad used to talk about the real world. He didn't talk about his experience of it, but this real world was the material world, I later realized. And at that point, when I just thought, no, this isn't. I can't exist in that. I can't be in that. I have to be some other resolution. Obviously, I can't put it in the words that affected me. I only remember the event, but I do know that at that point, I vowed I would never belong to my father's real world. And basically, that's the answer to your question.
Mhm.
I have never been prepared to accept the absurdities and the atrocities of the material world, which continue daily. And, there's never been a day's peace in all my existence. And now is we're just living in a horror
Yeah,
if we accept the material world, which I don't.
right, right. And I actually share that sentiment. I discovered Crass when I was 24. It was 1981. Someone told me by looking at me, I had long hair, and they said, "You would like Crass." And I bought a lot of records back in those days. So I went to the record shop. I bought Christ the album and put it on,
Mm,
and I was stunned by its production. At first, I thought, "What is this?" Because it's not the kind of music I would listen to, but it was intoxicating.
mm,
Uh, I just followed your way of thinking once the internet came around and watched some videos, and I realized that your story is, while different from mine. I wasn't born in Canada. I was born in Europe. I'm
mm.
Hungarian.
Oh,
So
okay.
my parents went through the Hungarian Revolution. My
Yeah.
father, they tried to get out in 51. They were caught. My father was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And so, yeah, there were some hardships there as well.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about the world.
Mm, mm.
But it seems like we both did all right, though, right? I mean, you're doing fine there,
Oh, I'm doing fine. Yeah.
not being in the real world and all that.
I know. I mean, and I'm fine when I walk into obviously, if I want to catch a bus, I have to accept that, there are certain formalities.
Hmm.
There are certain formalities in meeting these people today about creating a new form of trust, a new form of existence, which, has got some really radical possibilities, truly radical possibilities, which break through this glue of the material world. But I don't feel like, oh, well, this is okay. I just
Mm-hmm.
feel like it, but sometimes it isn't okay.
Yeah.
And um, I mean, I feel this is engagement. It has two not, non-materialists in an engagement.
Mm.
Well, we have to use the tools of materialism to create this
Absolutely.
engagement.
Yeah.
From the machine that we're using to actually communicate, but also the mental machine that we're all switching on mind. Um,
Right.
I mean, my present writing is the myth of the self, and it's for me becoming a breakthrough. Um, the self mythologizing is actually the psychological practice of the material world. I mean, I haven't worked on it much yet. I mean, I've done notes and notes and notes. It tends to pop up when I'm meditating, rather irritatingly, etc., etc. But and in that sense, all of my work has been deconstructivist in the sense that I look at the material world and piece by piece, I try pulling out the bricks because I know it's not there.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's a delusion. It's not an illusion. It's a delusion,
Absolutely.
and that's why I'm not a Buddhist. Because the Buddhists take the comfortable option of illusion. Well, I take the uncomfortable option of delusion. Um, and I mean, and in that sense, I jump over Buddhism into a much more Taoist form of thought, which, is simply, it is.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. And you
That's
can't leave it. So just
right.
take it.
Mhm. I was not surprised that you write books when you told me in an email, and I went right away to look up what books I have here on my other screen. 8 different books. One of them I ordered, The Last of the Hippies.
Oh, right. Okay. That's the
Now,
big
now,
seller.
now, I used to be a hippie, so that was the word that caught my attention.
Yeah.
Then I read what it was about,
Mm,
and I didn't know anything about that. It was somebody close to you
mm.
was harmed and was killed. I understand,
Murdered, yes.
murdered, and this upset you and led to the making of Crass, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it helped towards it. I mean, he was murdered by the state.
Right.
And yeah, it made me very angry. I mean, up until that point, I mean, I had a band before then, all sorts of things, but it was all around a statement of possibility, which the house is supposedly, not supposedly, it does. It represents a state of possibility. This is what's possible. Um, and I remember one of the inhabitants at the time, because it has a flowing community. It's never been a commune. It is not a commune. It's an open house. Anyone belongs if they want to belong. They might belong uncomfortably because it's not that comfortable, or because they don't like the dialogue. But anyone can belong. That means shut the fuck up and just be. Um, I've got nothing to promote, and I don't. I never apostolate visitors. I make absolute rule of that, and neither do I judge visitors unless they force their judgment on me, and then I might respond. But I've slightly lost the plot. Where was I coming from?
Right, how you got to write Last of the Hippies, and I
Oh,
understand there's
okay,
a
yeah,
French
yeah.
version as well of that book.
Yes, there is,
Yeah.
and there's also a much more detailed book, which was the autobiography I wrote back in the 90s.
I see it. Yes. Yeah.
which is Shibboleth. Shibboleth actually tells the full story. Last of the Hippies actually was first published along with um, Christ the album, I think, wasn't it? In Christ the album,
I
something
think
like
that's what
that.
it says in the description on
Yeah, I
Amazon.
think it was, and obviously it's been sort of slightly enlarged and edited and worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Mm-hmm. So I see other books here as well. Chanson d'amour. What a nice
that
title.
songs of uh, love
Songs of
songs.
love. Songs of
Yeah,
love.
songs of love, and that actually is just all the lyrics, Crass lyrics, which
Okay.
I think that was published by Bracket Press, as far as I remember. But that, although now G stocks it as well, Exitstencil Press stock it. But
Mm-hmm.
the first book that I became published when AK Press got in touch with me and saying, "Look, we really want you to write about Crass." And I thought, I don't want to write about Crass. I did Crass, and that was a few years back, sort of thing. Uh, I had been writing. I'd been writing a book since about 1965, probably, called A Diamond Signature. I still think it's probably my best work because it worked utterly unconditionally. It was simply of itself. It's a sort of multi narrative weave, quite a complex weave. It's actually about a trip across. I would have been 19. No, I must have started it actually in the beginning of the 70s because it a lot of it is about a trip across America I made by road in the early 70s. So I don't remember the date particularly, but anyway, it became the work, and I didn't do anything else for the next 12 years or so. I just wrote the Diamond Signature, and that meant mean rewriting it, adding a new narrative to float, all sorts of stuff. And then when AK Press got in touch wanting this autobiography, I thought, well, yeah, but I thought I'll get them to publish Diamond Signature at the same time because I knew it was going to be an impossibility. Ferling Getty had read it actually and loved it, but they wouldn't touch it. And so that City Lights wouldn't touch it. And so and actually Ferling Getty wrote a sort of whatever you get on the back of books, saying the
Yeah.
most, all that sort of stuff. A lovely little thing, which I can't remember. It was a beautiful little line that he wrote for it, which was great. I mean, that was so beautiful. But AK Press agreed to do it because I said, well, I'm not going to do an autobiography unless you publish this book. And they agreed to that. And I now look back on Shibboleth, although it sold probably thousands, as it was a cop out, really. It was a piece of journalism. Um, it was me using there's a lot of fairly radical stuff in it. There's stuff where I would get so bored with what talking about yourself, your work, or what you've done it's
Right.
not really very interesting to
No.
me, because I've done it, and having to redo it and then actually reinvent it is what it boils down to. But I thought, well, the only way I can write this is around Wally. I'd never been able to tell the whole story of Wally Hope, who was the guy who was murdered by the state, assassinated. And so that's what I did. So I wrote the story that AK Press wanted, which was the Crass story. But bang central in it, there's a far longer and completely detailed thing of my of the murder of Wally Hope and my investigation into it, which led to my conclusion that this was assassination, etc., etc. But I sometimes regret it. I mean, Diamond's signature is certainly radical writing. I mean, I can understand it now. At the time, I couldn't understand it even. I just wrote it, and I'd go on putting more into it that I couldn't understand. My rule as a writer has always been, if I understand it, it can't be any good. I call on something to write itself. I'll look at it and it might be, I might think, oh, that's beautiful, or I might think, oh, that's ugly, but I don't know what it means. I just feel it. Like music, you don't know what music means, do you? You feel it.
That's right.
And I like to write that way. So I write in empty space, really. I don't know what I want to write because I don't want to write anything. It's the writing that wants to write, and I'm happy with that, and I let it. And in Shibboleth, I had to behave myself, if you like. I had to say, okay, come in, settle down. You're Penny Rimbaud. Now get on with it.
Yeah.
I don't really like being Penny Rimbaud. It's not a place I like to be.
Yeah. Your name appears on an interesting book. It's called The Evil Empire. You contributed to that book, did you not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's quite the statement. It says 101 ways England ruined the world.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
some of them I might not entirely
Yeah.
agree with, but basically speaking, the sort of the patterns of the arrogance of empire, which America's taken over on.
Yes.
Um, when I was a kid, even if you looked at a map, it was huge amount of pink, and pink was British colonies.
That's right. I
If
lived
you
the
look at Britain, is in itself colonial. I mean, the first colonies of Britain were Scotland, Wales, and Ireland,
mm-hmm.
and it didn't stop from there on. It was a huge empire. Uh, uh, we've now returned to being a pathetic little dot off the body of Europe. Through Brexit. I mean, I was overjoyed with Brexit, not because of the political or military implications, but actually being one with the culture to which I belong.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I mean, you can talk about Hitler, but let's talk about Strauss or Beethoven. Let's talk about Mozart. Let's talk about the beauty of German culture. Nazis, nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just reading Hannah Arendt's book again. I hadn't read it for maybe 20 years. And, the banality of evil. And I can't but treat it as a comedy, a Kafkaesque comedy. I'm laughing at it, at the utter banal, stupid barbarism. I mean, it's sort of beyond belief that it becomes completely believable. And that's how it's that changing these perspectives. That's where actually my idea of the myth of self came up. It was about the time, it was only a few weeks back, and when I started reading the Arendt again, and not finding it tragic and horrible. It is tragic and it is horrible and it's ghastly, but it's also extremely funny.
So you represent a form of anarchy, like I do. You call it anarcho-pacifism. Let's explain it to the people who haven't heard of this.
Well, it was not a label that I gave. It was a label that was given. We adopted anarchy with the band as a form of saying to both left and right, "Fuck off." I mean, I hadn't read any Bakunin, or, I wasn't conscious, learned. I hadn't learned anything about anarchy. Anarchy was look to yourself to me, and actually pretty much remains that. I am a pacifist in the natural sense. In the human sense, I rather doubt that I truly am. If there were the opportunity of, I mean, that became a real conundrum with Crass, where at some point, and those points arrived through some of the actions that we took. I mean, activism was always more important than musicianship with Crass. If we could be out on the street, we'd be out on the street rather than up on a stage. And some of the events that we were part of, tested one's pacifism.
Yeah.
What point do you hit back? I mean, I quite willingly, as an anarcho-pacifist, punched a policeman hard enough to have him drop the person he'd just arrested, and for us both to get away scot-free.
Yeah.
So, am I a pacifist? No, I'm not really a pacifist. It was
No.
it was a ploy, and neither have I ever been afraid of the nuclear bomb, for example. There's no point in being afraid of something which hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And by imagining it happening, one's actually compounding its power. Low system resources may affect your audio quality. Try closing some applications to improve performance. I don't know what to do, so I'll just keep going. I was just reading what I've got on my screen.
Yes. Computer's talking to us.
Yes. Yeah, it's saying shut the fuck up. We know what you're doing. Where was I? Sorry.
We were talking about pacifism and how that's a conundrum, and I understand because I even got a tattoo with a peace symbol on my right hand, and I haven't always been necessarily peaceful, though I want to be. I want to just live my life, and finally, as a retired person, I can. Except once a year, I have to pay taxes, and that's fine with me. Other than that, I just do what I do.
I don't pay taxes, and I don't vote. I wouldn't vote because I don't see the point. I don't belong in that world, so I'm not going to, pay into it. I think politically, what we've just been discussing at a meeting we're having at the moment in the House is opening the floodgates, basically, which I haven't looked at for 45 years. I mean, with Crass, we were trying to open the floodgates through where I've gone over the last year or two. Well, actually, the pandemic was a glorious, and it remains a glorious opportunity for contemplation.
Mm-hmm.
And I used this new space. There was no one turning up. Days expanded into years, and years, dissolved into nothing. And I started seeing real potential for, what the floodgates were. And it was the entry of nothingness and emptiness and silence. And there's the key. And I think there's 5 of us sitting around a table at the moment discussing this sort of new vision. It's something like the desire of trust, or the trust of desire. And it's a singular, unspoken purpose, which is by nature, through belonging, passed on, if you can understand what the fuck I'm talking about. In other words, opening the floodgates. We're all one. yet we actively and so precisely attempt not to be all the time through dualistic practices and all the rest of it. And I know that I am one. It's not a matter of thinking. It's not an intellectual game. I cannot remove myself from you, nor you from me. I am you as thou art I. And that's the key. And if we actually know that in the deepest sense, we are that. It's not about knowing it. We are that. We don't need to talk about know. That takes a requirement. There is no requirement in the actual nature of our particle existence. It simply is doing it in whatever way it does it. And in that, we are utterly, irretractably connected. We are one.
Yeah.
Well, if we are one, let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And that is the boldness of desire.
That's an interesting term. I'll have to think about that one. Boldness of bizarre. Excellent. I have a personal interest in, it says I'm running out of time, so that can go away. All right. Now, I don't go to Twitter as much as I used to. I don't find it all that interesting anymore, but I still have an account. And I see your almost daily pictures or paintings, they're done on a computer, I imagine.
No, they're done on a camera.
Oh, okay. Well, they're fascinating. So tell me all about that. I've been really wanting to know about that.
I started doing the tweets as actually what I think is a very genuine form of publishing. I give it away every day. I contemplate, I meditate, I write a tweet. And I very rarely miss a day, except when I'm away, when I can't actually physically do it. Then I just write them. And it's my commitment. It's a global commitment, and like when I perform, if there's only 3 people in the audience, well, they're the world. Or if there's 1,000 people in the audience, they're the world. It makes no difference to me. I don't care about what I get outside of what I do. What I do is my commitment, not what I get from doing it. And the tweet is actually, for me, one of the most exciting projects I've ever engaged myself with. It's very demanding, coming up with something which hasn't already been thought or which I haven't thought, etc., etc. Pushes my thinking. The photograph, and I from the start put photos. Well, initially I put just photos I'd already got, pretty pictures of the mountains, because like yourself, I'm a mountaineer, was a mountaineer. Then I started running out of pictures and thinking, and so I started taking pictures of things which had patterns on them. And then what I now do is I walk the streets of London with my eyes going that way to the walls, and it's minutiae. Practically all of those pictures are of tiny little pieces of torn paper or little splotches of paint. So I don't see the city when I walk through London. I see these walls going by. I have to switch off from that. The only way I can do that is not to take my camera with me. Well, the camera's got a little adjustment in it, which you can go through, and it either, it will push the contrast, or very simple. I think there's 6 options or something like that. And my rule is I only use the camera. I don't go off to Photoshop or play around with computer cleverness. I just do it all in the camera, and it's a beautiful little camera. Little Lumix Panasonic, and it does everything. It's a sort of world in there. So and then have these hundreds of pictures in the unused gallery. And I just flick through them looking for something which somehow or other reflects what I've written as today's aphorism. Yeah, I was just wondering whether I'd done one today, and I had. Yeah.
Well, I enjoy them. I enjoy them very much.
Well, it's a lovely way of, you all of this stuff with books, and they're big lumps of stuff. I've had the idea of, at the moment, we're putting the entire Crass catalogue onto a USB stick, and it's a nice little silver USB stick with a little symbol on it, so people can just plug it in, play it.
Wow.
It's going to be as cheap as we can do it. So it would probably be equivalent of something like, if you bought all the albums, it would probably be 150 quid or something or other. Well, you can get a USB stick with all of the artwork on it as well.
Oh, cool.
For probably for something like 15 quid.
Yeah.
$15, and that's great. And it looks good as well. You can wear it around your neck and be really chic. And
Cool.
anyway, the reason I'm telling you that is because I've been thinking of doing that with the tweets. I think when I get to 5,000 tweets, I think I've done something like getting on for 400, 4,000. I think something like that. I don't know whether I'll live long enough to actually do the 5, but if I do, I'll put it onto the USB stick.
That's fascinating. Wonderful. Penny, looking unfortunately at this time limit that I've got, and it's been really a pleasure speaking with you.
No,
I've written now 5 books.
yeah.
First two are nonfiction, and then I was tired of talking about myself and my opinions.
Mm,
So I switched to fiction, and now I'm talking about myself and my opinions through other characters. And
yeah.
I find that's very effective to get my ideas across. I wrote
Yeah.
about delusion. I wrote a book about anti-intellectualism and bigotry. These are subjects close to my heart.
Right. Yeah.
But I have characters acting them out for me.
Yeah.
First book, called Unfolded and Grown, I do acknowledge you in that book, because that was early on, and I was, growing and learning to be who I became, and you did play a role in that.
Thank you.
So we're going to wrap this up now, and it's been a delight speaking to you, Penny.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, we didn't get on to mountaineering, which was and is very dear to my heart. But next time, maybe we'll do
We
that.
mentioned it. I climbed in the Adirondacks. Where did you climb?
I climbed in Scotland and Wales. They're
Right.
the big mountain areas, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Similar in sizes too, and similar
Yeah.
in types of mountains as well. It's a
Mm-hmm,
wonderful
mm-hmm,
experience.
mm-hmm.
All right, Penny,
Okay.
you have
Yeah,
yourself a fine day.
yeah. Blessed.
Blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that concludes another episode of Tell Me About Your Book. If you enjoy what I do here, then please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to speak with you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.